What's up, it's Cinema Shogun here, and if you've been subscribed to my channel long enough, then you already know that for months on end, literally for months before it started, I was trying to warn people that there was going to be a massive conflict between Russia and Ukraine. At the time, our mainstream media here in the USA was still focused on the beer bug, scaring people into getting more boosters or whatever. And Ukraine itself seemed to be turning a blind eye towards what was going on, almost as if they were in denial. I mean, almost, I don't want to say the entire Russian army, but a large portion of the Russian army, and I mean tanks, you name it, anything you can think of, was building up right on the border of Ukraine and Russia. And the people of Ukraine, I guess, tried to act like it was not a big deal. It was like one of those ostriches situations where, like, you know something's bad is happening or something bad is coming, so you bury your head in the sand. That's what the people of Ukraine were doing for weeks, if not months on end, as troops and equipment kept building up on the border. And then, of course, eventually they invaded. And I covered extensively the first few weeks of the invasion right here on my channel, but I stepped away from the story, for one, because I realized this wasn't going to be a quick conflict. Of course, it could have been, but no, this is something that's going to rage out for years. And also because there was an extreme amount of propaganda flying around everywhere. I mean, when I first started covering the story, there were rumors of like the ghost of Kiev and Snake Island and all of these stories about heroes from the war, which were all fake. We were getting fed so much misinformation, and I was doing my best to stay away from it. And then I realized that Ukraine was being turned into the next virtue signal, the next talking point, the next thing that the mainstream media focuses on. No longer would they fearmonger us about the beer bug. Now they would fearmonger us about what's going on in Ukraine. And all of the people who follow up with every government movement, of course, they were all going to put Ukrainian flags in their profile. And, you know, they were going to virtue signal about it as much as they could. It became the mainstream media talking point. And that's why I stepped away from the story, because I saw so much fake information out there, and it just became a really crazy thing to try to keep up with. Now, I have been keeping up with it, but to report on what's real and what's fake every day, it was just becoming too much. What I will say is this. Russia, their plan hasn't worked out the way that they wanted it to. Things aren't going as good for Russia and Putin as they expected. That is true. But also what is true is that the West and the US, and, to be more specific, they're lying about how good Ukraine is doing in this war. Don't get me wrong. I think Ukraine is holding up better than we expected. But a lot of the news coming out of Ukraine that the West and the US likes to talk about on the news, a lot of that is fake information. You know, Russia has gained some ground. Ukraine has gained some of that ground back. It's been a really crazy situation. Tons of people have died. And as the situation drags out, it's only going to get worse. But make no mistake about it, even though this is a conflict between Russia and Ukraine, it's really turned into more of a proxy war. Meaning that this is a war that is being fought. Of course, Russia has its own reasons, but there's a lot of powers at play here. It's not just Russia versus Ukraine. It's Russia versus Ukraine. It's really Russia versus NATO at this point. And by proxy war, I mean the U.S. doesn't necessarily want to get involved and have boots on the ground, but they want to supply someone else to fight the war that they really want to fight, or they don't necessarily want to fight, but they want other people to fight for them. And that's what has happened here. there has been opportunities for peace talks. Boris Johnson flew to Ukraine, met with Zelensky, and talked him out of peace talks. That happened. Now, I know Boris Johnson is gone now, but before he left, that was one of the last things he did. There has been attempts about peace talks. And it seems that a lot of countries in NATO have discouraged these talks, which is weird because you think it would benefit them for there to be peace. But in reality, it's benefiting them for there to be war right now, because they're having this country fight a war that they don't want to necessarily fight in the future. I mean, it's a very complicated situation. I would encourage you all, if you're interested in it, to look further than the mainstream media and to really do some research about what's going on here, because it's undoubtedly going to affect all of our lives. It already has, and it's just getting worse. You know, I'm not trying to choose Russia's side here, and that's not what I'm doing at all. I'm not on Russia's side. But when you're talking about a situation like this, when you're looking into a situation like this, you can't have a one-tracked mind. You can't be closed-minded. That's what our governments would like, of course. But you have to view the bigger picture here. And the bigger picture is, how long will Russia fight this war with Ukraine, knowing that all of these outside influences and outsiders just in general, these other countries, are so heavily involved in it? How long before he retaliates against someone else? How long before America or some other country just goes ahead and puts boots on the ground? Well, now it appears that things have gotten worse over the past couple of weeks. As I reported to you all before, there was some type of event that happened to the Nord Stream pipelines. Everyone seems to think it's sabotage. I think it's sabotage as well. However, I don't believe that it's Russia. NATO is all pointing the fingers at Russia, trying to claim that Russia sabotaged their own pipelines. Mind you, Russia has nothing to gain from this at all. Whereas America has everything to gain from this. And America has literally stated multiple times that they would take out this pipeline one way or another, that it wouldn't be allowed to happen. And then the pipelines get destroyed, or they get sabotaged. And now, even though those pipelines belong to Russia, NATO is acting like that's an escalation of the war. And things have escalated. Boy, oh boy, have they escalated, because now Putin has deployed the Belgorod, which is a nuclear submarine that carries the Poseidon underwater drone, which is capable of unleashing radioactive tsunamis which lay waste to entire enemy coastlines. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. This is a weapon that many of you probably haven't heard of, although some of you, if you're into war and the military and things like that, then you probably know of this weapon. But it's basically like a nuclear underwater missile that you use to strike a coastline of an enemy. It will then create a massive tsunami, a massive wave. And when I say a massive wave, I'm not talking about the massive waves that you see people surfing on ESPN. No, I'm talking like almost a 2,000-foot wave that will come in and wipe out your city. But not just that. Within the wave is radioactive waste and materials. So it's literally a radioactive tsunami. And this is the weapon that is equipped on a submarine that is now missing because it has been put into active duty. Let's get into the details. Vladimir Putin has deployed a huge nuclear submarine carrying its latest doomsday weapon. NATO has now warned its members. A NATO warning note leaked to the Italian media over the weekend saying that the Belgorod has disappeared from its home base in the Arctic Circle and may be on its way to the Kara Sea to test the Poseidon nuke. Poseidon is a drone that is said to be capable of traveling huge distances underwater before detonating with enough force to trigger a 1,600-foot nuclear tsunami designed to drown and irradiate coastal cities. Man, oh man. Poseidon was one of the 4 next-generation weapons announced by Putin back in 2018 and is thought to be operational. According to the Russian media, it is capable of traveling up to 6,000 miles underwater before exploding a nuclear warhead in its nose with a force of 2 megatons. That is 130 times the size of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima in World War II. That would create an irradiated tsunami up to 1,600 feet high, designed to drown coastal cities and to leave them basically a nuclear wasteland. The warhead, however, has never been tested due to international prohibitions on the testing of nuclear weapons. Breaking with those treaties by testing Poseidon, even in the remotest of waters of the Arctic, would be a hugely provocative move by Russia. News of a potential test comes amid Russian saber-rattling over the use of nuclear weapons linked to the Ukraine war, where Putin has been stymied by Western arms supplies. The Belgorod can go up to 120 days without having to return to the surface. TASS has previously reported that the Poseidon drone has an unlimited range and a maximum speed of more than 125 miles per hour. Unique characteristics of the Poseidon system will help the Navy to successfully combat aircraft carriers and strike groups of potential adversary in any oceanic theater of war and destroy shore infrastructure facilities. It is a completely new type of weapon that will force Western people to change their planning and develop new countermeasures. This sounds really scary. They say there is no way to stop this underwater drone. It approaches the target at 1 kilometer depth with a speed of 200 kilometers per hour. The explosion of this thermonuclear torpedo close to Britain's shore will raise a giant wave, a tsunami. The tidal wave is also a carrier of extremely high doses of radiation. If it surged over Britain, it will turn what is probably left of everyone and everything into a radioactive desert, permanently unusable for anything. So that is what we're up against, ladies and gentlemen. And I don't make this video to scare you. I make this video to warn you all and to prepare you all for what is going on in today's world. It is so easy to distract yourselves with entertainment, with work, with life. And it seems as if our news media focuses on things that aren't always important. I know that right now, people rather watch a video about something that happened with some celebrity that won't affect them in the least bit. And I like making those videos too, and I like talking about those topics as well. But we as a people have to start educating ourselves. We need to be more aware. You know, we talk about awareness a lot in today's society, but if you ask me, we are totally unaware. We are less aware now than we were back then. It seems like now that we have the internet and we have unlimited access to vast amounts of information that people are becoming stupider than they used to be. Now, what I want you all to really focus on here, or what I want you all to realize here, is that the time for games is over. We are closer now to nuclear war than we have ever been in the history of the world, besides World War II, when they actually dropped atomic bombs. But there's always been talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Cold War. I can tell you right now that the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Cold War, that doesn't even hold a candle to what's happening right now. You could read the history books, you can look at it. It was an intense time back then. And I will say back then they took the threat way more seriously. I mean, kids during the Cuban Missile Crisis, they had kids doing nuclear bomb drills at school. It was a really weird time if you go back and look at it. But right now, we are way closer to the brink of a nuclear conflict or a nuclear weapon being used than we were back then. Yet it seems like everyone's going about their day-to-day lives acting like nothing's happening. And I feel as if a lot of people think that, oh, they won't do this, they won't do that. They're smarter than this, they're smarter than that. Look around you. Do you really think our world leaders are that smart? I don't. I think we've been under the impression for years that the people behind the scenes running all of this and making all of this work, they're masterminds, they're smart, but the reality is the emperor has no clothes. And as the fabric of our society and the veil that's been pulled over all of our eyes continues to lower and lower, and people see the world for what it really is, don't put it past the powers that be to start this mass-scale conflict. I believe that there are people and there are countries that really want this situation to get even worse. And sometimes it feels like Ukraine is even that way. How they applied for NATO over the past week or so. And just some of the stuff that Zelensky's been saying, don't get me wrong, I give Zelensky credit that he didn't hightail it out of this country as soon as this conflict started. But there's no denying the fact that Zelensky has pushed and prodded and he's trying to draw whoever he can into this conflict. And as far as I'm concerned, I feel bad for the people of Ukraine. But I also feel bad for the people of Russia. The reality is most people, normal people, they don't want this conflict. They don't want this war. If you look at Russia, there are people trying to flee that country right now as they draft more people into the military, sending them to Ukraine to die. We don't need to villainize the people of either one of these places. There's no reason to villainize the people of Russia. There's no reason to villainize the people of Ukraine. The enemies of the common people are the world leaders, and they will always be our enemies, regardless if we want to acknowledge that or not. And the day that we as a people, and I mean all of us all over the world, realize that, hey, the leaders are the ones that we should be focusing our energy on, then the world would really change. But I think that the powers that be sense that. There's been a pendulum shift. It's swinging into the wrong direction right now, at least for the powers that be. Because I feel like we've had a mass awakening of people realizing what's going on here. And before they allow people to gain some type of power, to really acknowledge and really come to the realization of all of the dark, twisted, weird, wicked stuff that's going on in today's world, they will spark another conflict to take our minds off of it. So I don't know what's going to happen here, obviously. I can't tell you all the future. And I could sit here and ramble on all day. But we have to start taking this threat more seriously. Because I know it's easy in your mind to write it off that, oh, no country wants this. No country wants massive conflicts and widespread death. You better give that thought a second thought. You better reconsider. Because I think it's in some people's best interest to make this conflict even worse. And when we're at the point where nuclear tsunami bombs are being freaking deployed into the ocean, and we don't even know where this nuclear submarine is right now, then I think we have to start raising our eyebrows when we start having to worry. Because long gone are the times of just talk. I know throughout the years there's been a lot of talk. There's been threats. And it's easy to just, I'm telling you, it's like, I don't know, you can almost sense the energy in the air from people. You know what I mean? Like the time of talk is over. The time of action is now. And I wouldn't put it past the powers that be that they may throw us into this conflict within the next year or so. So just pay attention to it is all I'm going to say. I actually have another story about this that I want to cover later on today, so stay tuned for that. But for now, let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all in the next video.